Howdy, guys. Welcome to West Virginia Commonplace. There comes a point in each season when I do a show that I have to bring on a special guest, and her name is Stephanie. Stephanie has a great podcast. She has an amazing voiceover voice that I might have to get her to like do the narrative if I ever make a movie. Stephanie, please tell everybody about your podcast real quick, and then we'll get into why we both are here today.
Aw, thanks for such a wonderful introduction. Okay, so my podcast is the Stephup Podcast, and it's basically I have conversations with people on a variety of topics, mostly on personal development, sometimes on religion, and what's the other one?
Didn't you do relationships?
Yeah, I always say religion, personal development, and there's a third one I always talk about. I can't remember now. My
But you
brain is not there today. I always have this problem when I'm talking to you. But those are my favorite topics. But yeah, and I said to somebody recently, it's like it's the best way to get free coaching because when you get the life coaches on, you're like, sweet, I got like a free session now.
Yes, no doubt. And audience, I did want to say this, and I was joking about this, but I may have to make this a future uh, Wednesday, Life Coach Wednesday. I may have to really do that one day in the near future because life coaches, they come in abundance, different topics and different methods and how they do it. Linear in the thought process, though. I will say they're a straight line across in their thought process. And you had a great episode that came out Valentine's Day.
Yeah, dating. I thought so. She's Lily Walford. She's a dating coach, and she's in the UK, so she's got a fantastic accent, right? So just brilliant to listen to. But the more I was talking to her, she's also a life coach. She deals with relationships, but she helps with behavioral profiling. So she's like, you can tell in the way somebody writes or in their body language and stuff, if they're lying or certain things, if they're narcissists and different things, red flags to pick up on. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I love that. I love behavior profiling. All that kind of stuff is super fun. So, and she was just a blast to talk to.
So, audience, definitely make sure you go check out that episode. And that's the first part of our shameless plug of this episode. Now, on to the topic of the day. And this episode is a behind the scenes episode. I've been doing this series for quite some time. I've had different guests on. We're talking about different aspects. And this is your first time on for behind the scenes episode. We're going to talk about something in the podcast community because there's one thing I like to do for podcasters as a whole. I love helping. That's my number one thing. And I love to see other podcasts flourish and go to the moon with whatever they're doing. But when you shake someone's hand, there's a reciprocity in that. When I shake your hand, you shake my hand. There's two hands touching. My grip might be stronger, yours might not be that strong. Your hand might be cold, mine might be warm. So if my hand's warm and your hand's cold, I'm making your hand warm. So that's reciprocity right there. Inside podcasting, I've been doing this for over 5 years now. With this and then the previous podcast that I was a part of. Um, I've noticed, and this goes as far as podcasters and guests, so I'll include both of them. Um, Typical example, you go do a show. And anybody that does a show with me knows that your show is going to be on a list. It's going to sit in my archives for a while unless it's already planned. I will ask them, we research Trevor, Irish Steve, Stacy, whoever's with me when we look at a guest, even a podcaster. I don't look at how many numbers you have. I look at how you promote your podcast or whatever you're doing, how you promoted it prior to even setting foot in the virtual studio with me. And I notice some people that it's because I want to have them on, not because of any type of paid situation or whatever. When I want to have them on, and I know that they don't promote very well, I'm fine with that. I can live with that. But I see someone with 10,000 followers and they're promoting their product, the newest hair gel to make your hair turn green in the sun. And that person promotes that stuff, but they want to be I want them on the podcast and they decide that they want to be on the podcast. We do the episode. And what happens? I promote it through the roof. I promote every show for 6 to 9 weeks after they're done. And if your show gets a high number, I'm gonna keep repeating it. You'll be in the cycle for a long time. That's the only way you'll know you're successful with me if I keep your show funneling. But when it comes to that guest, 0 post, 1 story, and that's it. So Stephanie, podcast Reciprocity. What has been your story in this, and what is your opinion on this?
Well, that's a good question.
And guess too.
I okay, when I first started my podcast, I was basically on Facebook and I just thought it would be fun to talk to people and I didn't really think about, oh, you have to post things. I was so clueless. But then I don't know if it I think I was learning more about podcasting. They said, go on Instagram and different things and promote it and then use Canva to create your graphics. And I didn't even know that stuff. Like I was so old school. Um, so when I started doing that and then I would just tag people, I thought, oh yeah, they were so excited to be on the podcast and talk. They're gonna comment and they're gonna reshare. And most times people do. But sometimes I feel like, oh, okay, where'd you go? What happened? And so I think that can be a little bit frustrating, especially when they are excited. I get if they don't really care that much, or if they're super, super busy and they're just, they're doing podcasts 5 a week or whatever. I can understand that, but I think it's just a little bit disheartening too, because you think, well, they were so such a great guest and so fun to talk to, and they were really excited, and then there's not much there. So I think that can be a little discouraging. But you know what I did find out from as I was going through different podcasting things, and they said, "Are you sending the graphics to your guest?" And so I didn't think of that. So what I was doing was I would do a graphic and then like the little sound bite from the podcast and send them an email the week that I'm releasing it. I was like, if you, in case you wanted, here's all the code, the embed link, so you can put it on your own website. And here's some graphics if you also wanted to share them as well. But I'll also be tagging you in all the socials. And I've had a few people who were like, sure, I'll reshare these. So I think that's also kind of getting your guest included, where sometimes they might not. I've been on podcasts and they didn't even let me know when it was coming on.
Oh.
So I'm like, what's happening? Right?
Okay, and like with me with that too, like with the whole guest package, I'm like, like I've gotten when I first started out, I didn't know anything about a media kit. The girls that gave me the groundwork of doing my podcast better in this realm of social media, they said that later on the next little session we had, they said get media kits. If they don't have a media kit, then that means that you're doing all the advertisement from the get go. And when they gave me that knowledge, I spearheaded that a new thought on that. So to me, I had to integrate how fast can I do a Canva ad for these people and ship it back to them, like you said. So I would ship it back to them early on before the episode even came out, like 3 weeks, or like I said, you would know that it's a link to time with me sometimes. So I'd let them know 9 weeks in advance, and I'm like, these are the key dates I'm dropping it. The time frames are automated because we've researched everything down to a T. We know that between 6 a.m. and this is a bit of advice I'm giving the podcasters real quick. Between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. you get your Eastern Standard Time. You get your most traction on Instagram, and then again from 3 o'clock until 5:15, and then after that there's some times in the evening, but I'm not giving all that away. But if you're a podcaster or any type of content creator, you can look at how things go. And I will let them know that there's key times to do this and that, the demographics that I'm hitting from the get-go before we even do an episode, and I'll tell them the demographics I'm trying to pick up by having them on. And I would do this with people, and people would be like, wow, that's a lot of analytics, that's a lot of science to podcast advertising or marketing. And then they would just fall flat. I would never hear from them again. And that's when I really started doing bulk episodes, because I realized, and it's not every single guest, but I'm going to say it's at least 70% on my end, do not put the marketing into it that we put into it. And
Yeah. That's why I enjoy the conversations. I find it fun. I do get a little bit nervous because I'm like, what if I don't have enough questions? What if it's awkward? And I go through all that. But I really do enjoy the conversations. I think the hardest thing with the podcasting is just going through the episode, doing the show notes, doing the graphic, getting the sound bite, because I have to listen through and go, okay, what's a really good one that I can put here, and bring it all together is just even editing. Like I do send my audio conversations to German at your podcast editor, and he's fantastic. Yeah, he's so sweet. But even when I get it back, I still go through it because I have to listen in order to do the show notes, and it's just so much work, and it takes hours and hours, at least for me. I'm sure some people are quicker, but I'm also very like kind of OCD. Like I'm very particular and anal about things, right? So I'm like, oh man, I'm so spazzy. So that might take me longer, but it is so much work.
Okay.
And I don't
And
find that particularly fun. The graphics can be fun sometimes, but when you have to do it, like, and you have a deadline, you're like, oh, I need to do this by Monday because that's when it's coming out. And I kind of get a little anxious about it.
and I tell you this one thing I'm going to take from other podcasters. I'm going to eventually just build a generic one for certain things that I do. Like if it's a normal Thursday show, because I've seen one guy that just adds a picture of the person and puts their name in cursive and just keeps getting up. You know who I'm probably talking about. I'm going to do what he does because it's simple, flat. But over now to podcasters, because we'll get back to guests in a minute. Podcasters. I love podcasting and I love podcasters. I love listening to different episodes when I have time in that 4 hours in a day. But one thing that gets me though, I like is a certain group of us that like each other's podcasts, anything that we post, basically, not in a succession. Some things we might skip. And me, I'm like this one, that one, not that one. I'll let that one slide because you did it on Wednesday and you normally do it on Tuesday. So Wednesday for another like for someone else, and that's all fine and dandy. That helps us. It doesn't do anything for our algorithm. But then we have these. I'm not gonna call them weirdos, but we have these stragglers that come along and they embrace us for certain amounts of time and then they look for that reciprocity. They want us to like their stuff. And I'm this type of person. If you like my stuff, thank you. I always will say thank you to any podcaster. Um, but that automatically does not genuinely get you a like back. And that is our main issue here. And that drives people to not like your stuff anymore, which is fine because they liked it and now they don't like it because you didn't like their stuff. But that type of reciprocity, I don't believe should exist in podcasting unless we're doing a collaboration together, unless we're common to each other. If you like what I'm doing, that's fine. Like it. But if I go over and listen to what you like, don't punish me for not liking your stuff. Like, if you liked it, keep liking it. Like, for instance, one of my favorite podcasters that I was listening to this last couple of weeks. Well, two of their episodes were not their greatest work. I could see that they were overshadowed by something. You could just tell that it was just forced out. So I didn't like it. I didn't put it in any of my spread and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm gonna let them sit there and do what they do. And I made sure that the decision, because I'm one of those conscious people, like I want to make sure that I'm doing it right. I asked a few of my colleagues that listen to that same podcaster, and they were like, yeah, in the rudest way, they were like, that shit kind of fell off. And I was like, it happens to all of us because I have episodes that I'm not proud of. We all do, but it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just like dealing with other podcasters. I'm like, if you like it, that's cool. Because some people go hectic with it. They'll do 50 likes, and I don't even know who they are. And their show is called the Old Hickory Podcast. Automatically, your name's going to make me not listen to it because I have nothing to do with Hickory. So, I mean, not to be rude, but do you run into any of these issues, like with people liking things and then you go listen to it, or and we're not trying to deter anybody from listening to our stuff or anything, but I'm just saying in a nice way. Is it some things like, or some type of podcast aggression or things that have happened to you in podcasting that make you like, I'm not gonna like this person's stuff? Like it's
Yeah, I find that difficult actually because I do want to support other people, and it is important to, like, even getting a like, it's so sad, right? It's like that dopamine hit where, or if you don't get anything, you feel like people don't like you. And then you see other people who are posting, a picture of something like, "Oh, I ate this today," and you're like, "They get 500 likes." So what? It can be challenging, in your mind to kind of realize that your worth is not does not matter on the likes and the comments, right? Um, but yeah, it is hard because I don't also like I want to support people, but it's also important to like things that are consistent with your brand. And I have a hard time with this because I'm not always good with that, right? Like I'll like things. I'm like, that's not really on brand with what, but I at it. I'm trying to support people, or I really do like it, and that's just like my inner self coming out and liking it. But it, I have seen certain people who were podcasts that a lot of it is just very if it's very loud and aggressive and kind of like a big circus kind of thing or really crude or something, I'm not going to like it because that's not part of what I do or who I am, right? And so I I have had to actually block a few people who just consistently send me stuff like our podcast comes out here and here's here's a message about it and stuff. And so I found that was I felt bad, but I'm like I shouldn't feel bad because that's just not who I am.
And I agree with that. And like I say with me, this is why I like likes and certain things with me. I'm kind of like, okay, because I put out way too much. And someone told me, they're like, every day you have a post. You repeat posts with 15, 7 days, 4 day intervals in between them. I'm like, that's part of the marketing. I've always been aggressive in that manner. So I said, I don't expect the same people to like everything all the time because I'm just putting it out there so that it's fresh on the top at certain times in the morning, in the afternoon. And then when it comes to evening time, if you see a post there, I've literally created it myself. That's not part of my automation. So I said, automation is a heavy part in what I do. And I said, for some people, that's a lot because you see that it's a lot. It pumps up on your feed. You're going to see West Virginia Uncommonplace at some point on your feed in the first 4 scrolls. So that right there, I personally don't take a issue with people not liking it all the time because they're seeing it all the time. And that's just part of my market strategy. That's what I've always done, and it's worked. So that's what I'm never going to stop that. So some people have a complaint with that, and when they don't like it, I say there's a great thing you can do. You can mute my story and you can mute my post. When you want to talk to me, you can hit that messenger button and contact me if it's something you want to talk about, blah blah blah, or something you think that I should change. So I tell people you always have that great option because I'll be honest with you, like I can't even get to my, and this is really harsh. I can't even get to my favorite podcast in my Instagram story because I'm flooded with so many. So I had to realize that some of these stories I'm going to mute. Some of these posts I'm going to mute. I like you guys. I'll check you out when I'm ready to see you, but uh, I want to keep a certain level of what I want to see and a little filler of what I don't want to see. But it's more of what I don't want to see on Instagram. So I'll just mute stories and mute posts and
I did not know you could do that.
yeah,
I
most
am
definitely.
so like I don't know much about Instagram at all.
Right. We'll definitely have to have a private conversation about that because that is the greatest thing. Because I've had podcasts, and I will say this: like I like everybody, but for some reason, the moment you become common with one podcast, another podcast, like there's podcast politics. Certain podcasts don't want you like another podcast after you get into their circle, and I'm like, okay, whatever your problem is or your strife with that person is not my problem. That reciprocity, once again, of being nice to each other and stuff like that, it doesn't get trickled down to. I decided that they tell you in all these podcast guru things to build a community or whatever. I've got 15 people in podcasting that I deal with in a month's time or every 2 months. Like we used to talk more, but you've gotten busy and life has changed a little bit. But we talk at some point, like something or share something. So those are the type of relationships I like in podcasting. I don't like this. We're just cool this week, and I come on your live because you need a guest, and we're just cool this week. Stuff like that. I don't fly with that. I turn down those invitations all the time. Have you had any of that happen to you?
Where people not really I don't really get into the community that much.
And see, that's
I
why you stay safe.
you know so many and I'm like, "Whoa, how to be honest, I go on Instagram, I post, I kind of, go scroll through a little bit and then I get off. I wasn't on it for like I think wow, around maybe December and January. I didn't want to do social media at all. I was hiding from it. So, yeah, Instagram is an interesting thing. I'm mostly on Facebook. and I'm on Twitter. Like I just post when I go on it to post, and then I do the same thing. I just go through and then that's it. I don't want to go back on.
And right there, podcasters, that's good advice. You can build a community with someone like me that knows everyone and moves around with them, and then you have connections to everyone basically. And that's a good way to be. That's what I've gone back to. I've gone back to removing myself from the community, like you said. And I always talk about the automation. The automation is what keeps my social media and keeps, like, I don't personally, I've never had anxiety, but to keep any anxious feelings or anything away, I just pick a time. Like it's got a little scrolling thing for the dates and times. So I'll hit the scroll, and as long as it doesn't go too far, like if it's 10 days or 20 days later, I'll schedule that podcast ad then and say, like, if I make an ad for us today, I may post it today, and our episode obviously will be coming out sometime in March. So with it coming out in March, that'll be in my next season. So it'll be something that I'm going to probably pull an episode that I had in that spot, throw it away until 2025 and promote it. And I'll take your picture, like just like with the dragon story, for instance. With that book, I have it plotted out to where it's going to be advertised up until July, because we did the episode in October and November of last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that moves it all the way around. So it'll continuously get pulled through. And then I'll have to pull it down and put it in my Instagram story. And that's one thing about podcast Reciprocity that I don't get. I tell people all the time, like when they want to share your stuff, go on iHeartRadio, go on Spotify. That simple download right there. I'll look at more people go to my stories, because that's the way that they can hide themselves without putting a like on my page. So people will go there, and I don't know if it ever generates anybody any type of audience or anything, but the notion of it's happened when I've been on other people's stuff, people will listen at least for 10 seconds, because when you hit that Spotify, it takes you automatically to the page, and you can click the first episode. Or if you embed the episode at a certain mark, like 10 seconds in, this is a secret, guys. If you start the episode on your device 10 seconds in and then share it on Spotify, it'll force that person who clicks it to go right to your episode at the 10th second or the third or fourth second. So that's an automatic listen.
Wow.
And
I
that's
don't even know how. So you would just do that and you can share it on Spotify? I thought it was already on Spotify.
Well, what I'm saying
I don't get it.
What I'm saying is take it from Spotify and put it on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
So if you play just a second or two into your own episode or whatever, and then you put it on or someone puts it on their story, it'll play right into that episode.
Oh, yeah. See, these are things that are, I mean, you study this stuff. When I started doing podcasting, because of all the anxiety and just fear, even being on social media, like I told you, right? That was scary for me. Putting myself out there, even being on here and putting out an episode was scary for me. And so when I would learn some more stuff about podcasting, I have to go really slow or else I get super overwhelmed. So yeah, but it's also like the technology. I was working a lot. I was in Toronto and I was in school and then working and just doing my thing, and I'd post on Facebook. But beyond that, I didn't really know anything. And I feel like I came out of this coma and I have to learn about Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn. Like I didn't do any of this stuff. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. But I didn't grow well, you're younger than me, but I didn't grow up with this stuff. So it's the generation who's growing up with it. They have a better understanding because it's part of their education and they're all doing it, right? And then when you get older, then you're like, oh, I need to figure this out.
Yeah. Well, I'll say it like this. Like I'm 36, I'm almost 37. I grew up in the weird age. Like when I was born, there was an original Nintendo in my house. I had a Commodore 64 at 2 years old. So like I grew up with computers. Commodore 64, I had to learn, and I'm talking like 3 or 4, someone was helping me after a while, but I learned how to read at an early age. So by 3 and 4, I could hit that command and hit that run, and I could get Oregon Trail or whatever to play on that Commodore 64. So yeah, I do get what you're saying. Like I grew up with computers, maybe not as advanced as the technology, but I've been through like you said, every plateau was important until I got into college. And then after college, I was one of the first groups that had Facebook, like the college-based Facebook. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm almost 20 years. Well, in 4 or 5 years, I'll have 20 years in on Facebook. You
Mm,
know, so
yeah.
I do get that. And the technology, like you said, it is kind of challenging in certain areas. But since we were on this topic, I've gone a little flat with things. Like I tell everybody that Facebook and Instagram connection to Business Suite, as long as you take your Canva and like with what you do, this is one thing that I like about you. You have your episodes already planned out and they're ready to go. Like with what you would do, what I would enhance, and this is turning into a different session now. um, like you got 4 episodes that are coming out. My Canva and all that stuff will be done. I'd have those ads placed, and then um, the only other high end trajectory is where you have the voiceover voice, just for you to record a commercial for your podcast and pass it around to your fellow podcasters you like. Let them put it in their show for free, and bam, that's the extra thing there. But technology wise, like it is kind of daunting and hard because every guru out here is saying jump on this, jump on that, da 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 da. Nah, I don't do
Oh,
it.
oh, don't even get me started on that. And that's the problem when you're scrolling, because going on Facebook and going on Instagram and you scroll and there's ads come up. And because I was looking into voiceover, podcasting, personal development, like life coaching, and then when I wrote my book, as soon as you Google that, now I've got ads for everything. And I signed up for all these webinars and this and that, and I just got so overwhelmed. And it's awesome that we have these tools, but it's also, especially for people like me who can get overwhelmed very easily, we have to really learn how to not let it take us over. Like I should just okay, scroll. It's fine. I'm not looking at that, right? Um Actually, when I talk about like anxiety and depression and overwhelmingness and all of these things, somebody recently mentioned to me that she was diagnosed with adult ADHD. And
Oh,
she goes, "You might want to look into it because a lot of the stuff that because when we think of ADHD, we think of like the little boy running around who can't sit still." And she goes, "Well, it's different in adults and females and stuff like that. And a lot of that is me and hypersensitivity, all these different things." So I'm like, maybe that's why it's always been hard for me with different things, because I learn different than other people, or I'm looking into it. I don't know if I am yet, but it might be another step in figuring out like why do I find it harder than maybe some other people, you know? Sorry,
yeah.
that's like a different topic, but
Yeah, but I mean that's a good stretch though because understand this like in talking about anxiety inside podcasting because like I said this is behind the scenes episode. You're a very well accomplished podcaster, even if you don't want to take claim to that. With what you do, you got quality. Talking about that is a good thing because like I said, someone like me that doesn't have, I don't have a like everybody says I'm high octane and I'm like no, not really. I just when I do something, I do it. I'm one of those people that like to complete stuff way too fast and get everything done so that I can rest. Because like all I've been doing now is resting. Like what you're doing right, what we're doing right now. This is an episode because it's fun to do. It's not pressure. There was no script to this episode. We started this episode. We talked about a topic. We moved on to 4 other topics.
I love that.
Yeah, and it's just free flowing and fun. These are the type of bonus episodes, and in my case, it's just an episode I like to just put out because it's 2 podcasters that get along with each other. We're friends. But yeah, talking about the mental aspect of being a podcaster because it's really hard because, like you said, the anxiety of having to marketing is very hard, and I guess the pressure that comes on me with stuff is like where I have so many episodes, I have to pick their quality. That is the most nerve wracking thing because me and you both know, like when you listen through certain episodes and you hear your guests and you really thought, me and you were type of people, we have great questions. We're gonna wrap our head around and get some good questions out there. And then I hear the lackluster answer, a flat answer. It's kind of like, do I throw this episode away? And the podcast gurus say, oh, throw the podcast away. Da 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 da. Nah, I put it in my archives. It will sit for a long time, but it will eventually see the light of day because no matter the content, I still want people to hear it, but I'll put a disclaimer at the beginning of it. This is an episode from the vault because blah, 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 blah. I felt this, blah, 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 blah. So that's how I deal with I guess if I want to call it anxiety or just my disposition in an episode, or the mental struggle that I have with, should I put this out? So you
Mm.
telling about anxiety is a very good portion, because podcasters don't get to talk about this, and we don't embrace this. We always talk about all the mental health of everybody else, but we don't talk about what happens to the actual podcaster when we got the mic, we got the pop filter, the boom, and everything around. We don't do that.
Well, I'll tell you another thing then. When I re-listen to my episodes, I am paying attention, but, and I realize this, when the person, sometimes they'll say something and then I'll ask a question, and it isn't until I listen to it that I realize they'd already answered it. And then I feel really stupid because I'm like, Stephanie, were you not paying attention? How did you not do that? But I think because it takes me a while to process. And as they're talking, and I've had podcast guests who will say a lot of stuff, or they might talk fast, or they're saying like so much brilliant stuff that I'm like, I can't comprehend. And so I'm not catching up. And I'll repeat what they say to understand it myself, or I'll ask a question that they have already answered. And I have to kind of give myself grace with that, right? Because I anticipate, oh, Stephanie, because that's how I grew up. I was always like, the negative was always picked up. It wasn't like anything encouraging. So it was like everything you did that was wrong, it was told to you. So that's super hard to get over, because I will pick up on everything wrong that I did. And so I'm like, oh, how did you not get this? How did you know? And I'm worried that I'm going to get somebody who will message me and say, oh, how people are. Sometimes
Yes.
they just want to say something negative. That's why I kind of am glad I don't have that many listeners, because the more listeners you get, the more you're going to get people hating on you. And I can't handle that. But I just realized maybe that is part of, because maybe it is ADHD, but maybe it's my brain just isn't catching up, and that's okay because that's who I am. You know what I mean?
Okay. Now let me ask you this. Have you thought about doing a mailing list yet?
A what?
A mailing list, like email
Mailing
mailing.
list. Oh, yeah, I've thought about it, but I hate getting them in my email. So
That's why I didn't send you one.
I actually get, because I get so many emails, I get enraged when, even like I'll ask somebody a question and then I'm added to their mailing list. I'm like, no, I don't want your mailing list. But I know people have said it's fine. Like you should do one. Like even if you just do mailings once a month or whatever. I remember signing up for something and they spammed me like 5 times a day. It was for
Oh
this like
wow.
public speaking coaching thing. And I wrote back and I said, this is not very effective because I'm actually annoyed right now. Like I'm angry with you. And this makes me, why would I want to take your program when you're spamming me all the time? Right. So,
Well, I just sent out
but
to.
I know it's helpful. I know they say to do that. It's just me.
I just do it because of like I'll say this. I get feedback from my fans and stuff, and they're like, "Man, we don't like that crap you were doing 2 weeks ago. Let's not do any more episodes like that." They keep asking me to bring back the projector episode because everybody. One thing I want to clarify this episode. Someone asked about why I show the food that I eat all the time, because I go to a restaurant here and there, and people, because I do that video when it spins this way, spins that way.
Yeah. And it always looks so good.
The reason I do
Like
that,
I'm going to eat it.
the reason I do that is because my mother, me and her may talk on the phone, but she will not communicate with me on FaceTime. But she always wants to know what I'm eating. So and people think that I'm doing it to show off or something. I'm like, no, 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 because I'll show you food in the house, like I did this week. I showed all the dips and stuff that Stacy made. But I that's one thing I do there. I do that all the time. And I don't necessarily post it on Instagram, but it's in my story. So that's one thing I wanted to clarify there, because someone wrote about that. And I was like, yeah, I better answer that on an episode at some point, because people are always going crazy. They're like, what are you eating? Why are you eating that? And I'm like, it's just your normal restaurant down the road. But anyway, one thing I did like that you said earlier is about listening to someone and then just zoning out and asking the same question. That happens to me all the time, because I'll listen to somebody. The only guest that I had that was very vibrant, me and you both had him on our show, and not to plug him, Mr. Tucker.
Terry.
Yes, I had him on the show. His voice, it was so exciting. It was just pumped up. and he was so energetic that I had to skip certain questions because he was going on a different area, and then I had to come back to him. And by the way, I do want to tell you that was an amazing episode you did with him. And it was like someone that has energy, I'm going to do the different questions. But if it's someone that's just like this, talking like this, and I'm going to miss what they're saying because I've zoned out. I'm trying to look at my phone, and everybody knows I got 40 different computers. So I'm looking at different computer screens, looking at the stock market, even though I don't have any stocks in certain areas, and just something else to get out the way. So let me ask you, since we're spinning it all around now, one other thing I forgot. This is actually not a trilogy. We've done how many episodes now? Podcast Collide, a coffee break episode, your book. This is number 4.
Oh, and the first one was in what was that, January 2020?
That was the Podcast Collide.
Was that podcast? Oh, that was Podcast Collide. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was Podcast Collide.
Yeah.
The coffee episode, and then so this is number 4. I don't know why I put trilogy episode in there.
But the coffee episode is on mine. So for you, this is 3, I guess. For you.
So this is the trilogy episode. We'll eventually make a saga. So getting back to what I wanted to ask you, I lost my train of thought. Do you ever find it sometimes like, and this is like a brutal question, do you ever find like when you have a guest on and you've read the hype about them, because I know you do like I do, I at least read a biography or something of them, and I will admit this to anybody that sends me a book, unless your book is less than 40 pages, Stacy's going to read it. If it's a children's book, huh?
Can I borrow Stacy?
Yeah, Stacy definitely reads it, and then we talk about it. Children's books I read because I'm everybody knows I collect toys and different things like that, so I love children's books, especially yours. Topics in it very grown, but for the children, I like that. And anyway, have you ever had a guest one that just falls flat? Like their hype was way too much, and then they get on the show and then they're just garbage, dumpster juice. But with no names.
No, I don't think so. I pretty much, you know what? And actually, this is why I was starting to do I like to do the pre-chat with people just to get a sense of, do we have a great chemistry? And most people, they're super fantastic. There have been a few where I feel like I'm pulling teeth. Like, oh my word, I'm glad I had lots of questions and then I tend to I tend to talk for them, and I'm like, oh, darn it, I'm supposed to be like getting them to talk. But sometimes I just start going on when I feel like I'm uncomfortable or they're uncomfortable. I don't know. But no, actually my favorite episodes though are actually the ones where I found the person or it was something that I wanted to do.
Yes.
When it was people reaching out to me, like when I got a lot of life coaches, and I love life coaches, but sometimes because I go by topic, I'm thinking, okay, I have to think of a topic that I'm like, can you speak on this? And so I was never really excited about that or I found it a little bit more challenging than when my favorite episode that I did was on atheism with my friend David from The Graceful Atheist. And it was because I was going through questioning of some of the stuff in my faith. And I just really atheists were always like, they're the bad guys. They're the other over here. And so, it was always like pitted Christians against atheists kind of thing. And he was just the most wonderful person. And I was like, oh, I want to learn from you. And so that for me was one of my favorites. Or when we can just have conversations and I don't have to think of specifically, oh, okay, now what? When it just flows. But no, I pretty much, I think everyone's been pretty fantastic.
Okay. And my answer to that question is just real simple. Anybody that I don't do the pre-call because I research your information or somebody does in the camp enough to know if we're going to have you on the show. And one thing I don't do, and I will say this to anybody, I don't carry someone along and oh, you can come on the show, you can't do this, you can do that, you can do that. Because I really hate that inside podcast. And if we're going to do a show, I'm going to get you at some point. I do storyboard everything. So I tell everybody certain time period, certain timeline, and you'll fit in there. It may not be today, might not be this week, may not be next month. but it'll be in the near future. So that's just one thing I like to throw out there. If you want to do a show with somebody, you tell them you want to do it, please do it with them. But when a guest is just bad, I've only thrown away, I've got 155 plus episodes out. I've only thrown away 20 episodes.
Oh.
And I've thrown away completely, not even the archive. And I threw those episodes away because just after you get done with it, all the legality, because certain guests are funny.
Yeah.
After they record a show, they don't want it to come out. And I'm like, hey, if you're a guest on my show, you sign a guest release. If I do something with another podcaster, I'm not going to send you a guest release. If you don't want to put out, we don't put it out, whatever. But I'm like, you sign a guest release. If you didn't want this episode out, and this is something that's real harsh, but I tell everybody, protect yourself. This is how much it costs to get out of that now. Because I put time into marketing, to advertising, blah, 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 blah. I could have been playing video games, or I could have been doing an episode on projectors if I wanted to again. So I protect myself there. So when these 20 times come up, and it could have been later on, like someone had a conflict with the episode, I'm like, okay, whatever. Just remember the dotted line we signed on. And that's the harshness with me now. Like, I've learned that you got to protect yourself more than just freelancing and like, oh, let's do an episode, because people will draw out and drag you to court, at least in the US, over this stuff.
Well, why? I'm confused, because when I'm on a podcast, I'm like, yeah, release it. Why would they want to get on a podcast and then say, oh no, I don't want that release? Like, what do you know, like what's happening there?
Yeah. So I'll tell you some politics that happened. And this is why I left certain communities inside podcasting, and I've become very mute in what I do. If someone I associate with on an Instagram live, or I associate with someone outside of whatever, and they're very controversial, and this guest gets wind of this, and this is something they don't like. So here's a great example. I deal with a lot of people that are Catholic. I lost a lot of Catholic listeners because I've done back-to-back episodes every December with a female Catholic priest.
Oh no.
So something like that, people are like, and I always get a disclaimer, and I do it every episode when I deal with people, when I kind of can tell that they have a religious background or something that may be Catholic. I'm like, hey, you do need to understand, I have 2 episodes with a female Catholic priest. That is something that's unheard of in the Catholic Church, and it's actually denounced. It's not written law about it anywhere. It's not supposed to happen. So that is very controversial to some people. And then certain topics that I may cover, we covered sex trafficking in an episode. I wanted to talk about that because between me and you, there's Michigan and Ohio. And Ohio is one of the most heavily sex trafficked areas in the world.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, wow. Yeah, when we think of sex trafficking, we think of like Thailand, or you don't think of US and Canada, right?
Right. And with Ohio
But
being right
there's
there,
so much. Yeah.
they might put them on a boat and take them above Cleveland, and then you're in Canada in 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, yeah, it's that close. But anyway, just minor stuff like that get guests all riled up, because like I tell them, I am a society culture show. I'm not a variety show, but I'm going to touch on topics that are happening in our society and culture, no matter where you are, because those topics happen: male, female mental health, empowerment, this and that. And like I said, on 20 occasions, maybe 10 of them with guest conflict to what I'm doing, they're like, hey, we don't want to be involved with this anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's what actually I've wondered that myself, because I grew up evangelical, and I've been saying some stuff lately, or just questioning things, and having an atheist on has been interesting. And having, like, I had Tim Whitaker from the New Evangelicals, which is a group about deconstruction, and challenging some of the politics and things like that. And I think I've lost listeners, but I don't know if it's because of that or not. But it would be kind of funny. But my pastor listens to those episodes, and he's like, "Oh, that was really great." And you know, some people are just going to get offended if you, no matter what, or yeah, if you're touching on something that they don't think is appropriate. But I think, my personal opinion, I think people should be aware of sex trafficking. It's not like we shouldn't talk about that. That's, yeah, we should, because it needs to come out into the light. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, I can understand how people would be. that's where it kind of gets tricky, because sometimes I'll say stuff, I'm like, oops. For somebody who maybe doesn't agree, maybe I'm totally like blacklisted in their mind, right? I don't know. But then you kind of find your tribe. I mean, if people are offended because I said something politically, then maybe they're just not my people.
So true. So true. And that's
And
how
you have
you,
to understand, like, I have a hard time, like, when people don't like me, I'm like, oh, how can you not like me? But I'm getting more like, okay, it's fine, right? Sorry, I interrupted you.
I know you didn't interrupt me. That was fine. That's the one thing that I do like about it, because it shaves off some of those layers. Like Shrek, he's an ogre, so he has layers to him, or an onion. It takes an onion and you get those layers off in it, and it makes it more easier to keep doing the content you're doing. And it lets me know that these people felt offended. So maybe they should go listen to podcast A, B, or C, or they can go over and listen to Charlie's podcast. Not my business anymore.
Yeah.
And that's one of the harder things that I had to get, because I used to be like, oh, I want every listener, I want everyone to listen. Like you said,
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt people's feelings. But then I found that once you get a core audience, no matter, and let's put this out there and open. It doesn't matter about your downloads or whatever. This is what I'm talking about strictly. You know who your core audience is. If it's only 10 people, 20, 18 people, those 20 people that listen, or 2,000, 200,000, those people that listen every weekend and week out, they know what your show's about. They like different topics and variety. One question I have for you is, in the selection process of who you have on your show, how do you keep your show from not being stale?
Oh, sometimes I feel like it is stale. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I need to mix it up a little bit. But um I think it's fun having different topics and different guests on. And I like to mix it up with different things, right? Um but like you and I have talked about this. You're going to have some episodes that have way less listeners, and you're going to have some that have way more listeners. And so I've noticed my more controversial ones um, get more listeners, or if it's religion and politics, mostly. The personal development ones um, don't as much. Oh, the mental health, they get more. But yeah, the religion and mental health get more downloads. But the personal development ones I find help me more, because like I said, it's like free life coaching. And when I go through and listen to the episode, I gain more, because like I said, if I'm talking to the person and my brain is not comprehending it all and processing it all right away, because there's just so much. And then when I'm listening back, I'm like, oh, and then I kind of wish I'd picked up on something that they said, but in the moment I was still processing it. But that's me. But some people are really good at interviewing, where they're fast and they pick up on things, right? And I've had to reconcile that's just not me. I'm just apparently processing longer, and that's okay, right? Because we
Yeah,
can get caught up in comparing ourselves, which is definitely harmful.
yeah,
Because we
definitely
are
don't.
all unique and we all bring something to the table. And yeah,
Yeah, because
that's
like,
helpful for podcasters to know, right?
yeah,
Sorry.
that is something good there. Because like people say that, like, we don't like that your show's scripted. Well, I said, people listen to my show. I script my show. My show's not scripted. Like I say, we're gonna go point A to point B, camera light A, hit right here. Turn your mic this way so that we get a crystal clear sound. No, it's none of that. I just have structured questions so that if I do deviate on the fly, because I can do the on the fly like we're doing now. This is fun, so I'll do it. But when I'm interviewing somebody, and like you said, going back to that one aspect of, it's someone that came to me, it's kind of hard sometimes, because I'm like, man, I got these 10 questions. Let's just get them out the way. I throw in some banter. I'll throw in some of the trademark stuff that we do, like the certain amount of questions, the hidden talent, the Barbara Walters 2020 stuff. I'll throw that in here and there now, or just vintage stuff as they call it, and that's fine. But I just, I don't know, like, just sometimes I got to get through that show and get it over with, and
Yeah.
and I'm done with it. Now, lastly, before we jump off of here, um, we all have different ventures we're going into. We have different things going on, and one thing that I'm going into is, and I'll eventually have to have you on for that. I'm actually going into the market of doing a live podcast. Not
Oh,
not every week, not every maybe once or twice a month on Twitch. And
okay.
the reason I'm going into that is because I've noticed that if we do a live show, me and you, and we're just talking, and you'll have to let me know if you're available for that. We have fan interaction right then and there.
Yes.
So we can see the comments, we can get the questions out there, ask all that stuff. And I just want to do that just to do something different because I have to be honest, this question and answer podcast, after a while, unless it's fun stuff like this today, it gets to you. And all these people talk about pod fade, and I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about I'll quit or anything, but I do so many question and answers. You do so many question and answer episodes. It's sometimes just a relief to do something fun inside podcasting because the research it takes for us to get to get guests on is not hard because people come to you or you go find what you want. It's the part of scheduling, getting the questions ready, and actually making sure that person shows up for the interview because I have an issue. I like people to be prompt. I like you to be here 5 minutes early. Or you have from say like the interview's at 11 o'clock, for instance. You got from 11:55 to 11:05 to enter my interview. At 11:06, I've already canceled, and I'm going about my day, and I'm going to go eat a bag of chips or do whatever else I want to do. Even though I might not have nothing else planned for the rest of the day, but it's just that type of etiquette I like. So, do you have any rules or certain things with guests if a guest shows up too late? What is too late to be on your show?
Oh my word. See, I remember we've talked about this before, and I have not had any issues with people. Sometimes they show up really early, and then I feel like I need to, because I get an email notification that
Yeah.
they're on, right? And I'm like, oh man, they're like 10 minutes early. And then I feel like I need to get on because I hate keeping people waiting. But even though like that's a boundary, right? Like, yeah. But I've not really no. I've heard about guest release and all that. And I was like, oh, that's so stressful. And I've signed a few, which I'm like, ooh, nice and professional, right? Like Pello tea, yeah, Pello tea with the podcast. Pello talk with
Pillow
the tea.
pillow tea with pillow talk with the tea.
Yeah. Oh my word. With Q, she has like this fantastic email she sends you when you sign a release. And I was like, oh, fancy. I don't have any of this stuff. But I mean, it's a great idea. It's just I don't really do that. But I've not had any issues with people. They've all been on time. They've all been fantastic. And so, yeah. But I know that that's important. Yeah, I don't know what I would do. I usually like I email people just before, a few days before saying, "Are you still good with this time and date? And here's the link and stuff." And then they respond back. So,
Because I'll tell you a quick story before we jump off here. The podcast that comes out this week that I did a podcast collab with a lady, Victoria with Little Decisions podcast. We went back and forth and we had time set, and I missed a little bit of time. She missed a little bit of time, and it put me too far out. Like because everybody knows I'm in West Virginia, so certain parts that I'll go to, we don't have cell phone service until I get home because it's Wi-Fi. Everything in this house right here is Wi-Fi. There's no cell service out here until I go 5 minutes down the road. So the craziest thing that happened is we finally like I was gonna have to reschedule her until like this time because I wasn't doing any shows till whatever. So I got somewhere down the road in the marvel of Zoom. I recorded her episode in the car on the hotspot because I had a little bit of service there with the iPad, listening with no microphone or anything. Because my setup, I can carry it anywhere, but to hook a microphone up to the iPad runs off that power, and you have to have a place to set it. So I'm in the car. We recorded that podcast collide with the iPad on the steering wheel like this, and and the reason that I ended up doing the episode because like I said, I felt good about it, and it was like certain type of schedule restraints, like we would just miss each other by 5 minutes here and there because I was on for the meeting. Then she came in for the meeting. I lost service in one area. And when I came back, so we just recorded it on there and it came out pretty good. Had to start doing more editing. But outside of that, that's the only time I've ever made a decision that was like, hey, I'll do this show. But if it's a plain old guest, just regular old guest, and you're not in that 10-minute window, 11:06, gone. And I had to set the boundary up because people will take advantage of you in your time. And I've even had like when we first started doing our stuff in January of last year, I had guests that would just say that they're going to come on the show and then oh, I forgot. No, you didn't forget. I send you something in your DM and I email you something and you confirm. You can lock
I
it.
don't get that. I like, seriously, I'm the type of person, like, I have to be there for appointments. I know when they are. I'm early. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand when people forget or they just don't show up. I don't get it. Like,
Right.
what's your thinking behind it? Are you thinking, "Well, screw them. I don't care." Like, I don't understand. But I don't, yeah.
Yeah, so that one's really twisted. So once again, Stephanie, I want to thank you for coming on West Virginia and Commonplace. We had a behind the scenes episode that started off with podcast Reciprocity. We moved over to the mental health inside podcasting to a degree. We'll have to do an episode
Yeah.
on that in the near future. And then with that, I hope that we can get a collaborative effort of a few podcasters we like. That should be something we do. You be the host of that, and if you decide to take that brainchild and go with it, that will be a good one because different
That would be
aspects.
fun. Having different, like, all, yeah. We got Brandon on, we get Shepherd on, like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely we need to work that out. So you figure that out, and I'll come on for it. And just keep doing what you're doing. And real quick, do the shameless plug for your book, for your show, and if you have anything else that's coming out soon.
So my show is called the Stephup Podcast. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. My book is called What Should Dragon Do? You can buy it on Amazon or like Barnes and Noble online. It's not in the physical stores. Or you can order it through my website, www.stephanieannweb.com. And it's a story about Dragon who lives with two bear roommates and how living with people is hard. And when we're angry and have certain situations, being kind is always the best choice. What am I doing now? I got so many things that I want to do, but I'm still trying to work through, and so I'm not really yet to talk about it, but yeah, kind of moving on to next steps in life.
But one question that's tried and true, you will be continuing podcasting, correct?
Well, I'm actually ending season 2 shortly, and I don't know. I'm either going to take a very, very long break, or I'm not really, when you kind of lose passion for something,
Yes.
it's telling you something. So maybe I just really need a long break. We'll see.
Okay, so I put you on the spot there because her face did a little extraness on there. So let me do this, and these are the greatest words of encouragement that were given to me by those two ladies from the Late Late Show podcast that no longer exist now, and they're off doing bigger things. Heck, one of them works for Universal Music Group now. Anyway,
Wow.
so one thing I will say to you here, I got comfortable in podcasting. I recorded so many shows at one time between 2020 of January till August of 2020. I built a crazy catalog for no reason. It put me in a position where I rest now because I have episodes because I want to continue. There's no issue with taking a break. Would I quit podcasting? In my opinion, of what you do, no. Don't do that. I'll say this: take a well enough break that you visualize the content so that it's easy to the tongue. Right now, it's hard for it to go from the brain to the tongue. And that's what we don't talk about. So my personal opinion is even if you walked away from it for a while, you could walk away for 6 months and come back. Let's do 4 months, but 6 months is a stretch. So if you decide to take a break from it, take a break and get all the values that you had while you were podcasting and before you were podcasting back in the same arena. So that all those values. And this isn't the life coach of me. This is just general podcasting and podcast counseling because I do this on the side on Tuesdays, every third Tuesday in the month. If you need that, anybody hit me up on www.westvirginiaandcommonplace.com. And that is true. So you have a great show. You have a great product. Nobody produces what you produce. And when I say produce, I'm talking about from pre-production to the end. Some people do like I do. I have an amateur's podcast, so it's very easy. I can do this episode right now and not edit it and not feel bad.
See, that's the thing that I get so caught up in, and I'm like, oh, I gotta do this and this and this, and it just gets it takes up a lot of time and it's energy draining.
But I'll tell you this now. I bootlegged a $200 or $300 program called Logic Pro, and every one of my episodes I do now, I edit them. So I understand that pressure. like the stuff that I'm going to, like when this episode comes out, I'm going to turn this into spatial audio, and no one will ever hear that spatial audio but you and me. If you have an Apple device, if you don't have an Apple device, I'll just send you a regular copy. But uh, I understand the pressures, because producing and producing and producing, it gets old, because no matter what we do as podcasters, we're a little bit underappreciated. Not by the fans, but by the guests and by other podcasters that sometimes leech off of whatever we do. But in your case, take that break. After you do that, visualize how you want to continue doing, because you do 4 episodes. So you could easily, barring working through your anxiety, you could actually stockpile 8 episodes, produce 2 months, and then between that time, the second month in, sort of like what I do, or I started, produce a little bit more content, but be cautious of it, because like you said, you like to edit. So it takes 2 weeks to get that episode perfect, correct?
Well, when I send it to my editor, I say, well, if you can have it back by Friday, because I release it on Monday. So I go through and I do take out certain like mouth clicks. If you hear like,
Or the click of the mic.
actually, it's like the saliva sounds. If you hear
that.
Yeah, when I was kind of getting into voiceover, that was a huge thing. So now it just bothers me and I hear it all the time. So so I hate that. So I take those out, and then I go through and I do all that on the weekends.
And you're an
show
Adobe
notes and everything.
And you're an Adobe Edition person. So you do
which costs like $30 a month. So but that's what I learned how to do all this stuff on. And people use Audacity, which is free, which I want to try, but I'm like, I have to now learn a different program, which is going to be similar. But because I'm so used to Adobe, I'm kind of nervous but it costs, like, it's expensive, right?
Yeah. And that's why I like the whole deal with this whole Logic Pro. Everybody's like, oh, you got Logic Pro now, because that's the big thing on Mac. I was like, yeah, that's a bootleg copy. I couldn't afford to pay that much. And yes, you guys did hear that, and I'm not ashamed of it. If whoever the governing body is comes after me, you'll be coming after a lot of other people.
The FBI's knocking on your door.
Yeah, or the CIA, whoever. But most definitely take a break, enjoy life, because like that's what I'm doing now. And I tell you, like, doing this episode, it was fun. There was another person I want to do an episode with, and our schedules conflicted today. I had a schedule where I only had the evenings available, and now I have the day, because I'm working remote from home for right now. So I have all the time in the day to do an episode. I just work here, work there. So thank you so much for coming on. Definitely have you on in the future, because you come on for every season now. We'll just keep doing that. Even if you stop podcasting, I'll just like, Stephanie, got this episode. Let's wing it. Let's see how we're going to get it done. And definitely the episode we talked about earlier, I think that'll work out pretty well. And audience, you can catch Stephanie on all listening platforms. She has multiple different platforms she's on. The big one that I'm pushing for everybody right now is Radio Republic, or any other RSS feed that you listen, because I learned a hard lesson a week ago in podcasting. Someone told me that they stopped listening to my podcast because it was not produced on the podcast app that they use. I never took it into consideration that people listen on other things. So please help your fellow podcaster and everyone. Please let everyone know that you should be integrated on all podcasting platforms that people let you know about. Radio Republic was one I really didn't think about. So I went over there and I took care of that. So that's one thing I want to pass along to podcasters. Even if you don't care about that app, just know you could be losing a listener. And on that note, if you have any questions or anything about this episode, there will be amazing show notes provided to me by Stephanie, because she's got a lot of information. You can check those out if you're on Google Podcasts. I definitely want to encourage everyone to go over there, because with the show notes that Stephanie puts in there, it places you with her information, with her book. That's good SEO for her, and good searching for anyone that listens to the podcast over there. And the only other big surprise that'll be coming is after March 15th, I will be adding full transcription of every episode that has been produced. That is the major announcement that I will be making. after March 15th. So it'll probably be like around April that you'll get transcriptions. Because I found one thing that we don't do in podcasting that we should do more of is do transcription, because there's people that can't hear that definitely like to read.
Mm.
That's a lot to say. So once again, Stephanie, say goodbye to everybody, and then I'll say goodbye.
Goodbye. And thank you so much for listening and for having me on, JR.
Amazing.